She cooked the same dish every Sunday until her grandson uncovered a family secret. Welcome back and enjoy the story. Every Sunday, without fail, Grandma Jeanette would rise before dawn. She'd open the kitchen windows, tie her floral apron tight, and begin preparing the dish no one in the family dared to touch without her. Polenta con ragu, she called it, but it wasn't like any other version in town. It had a certain depth, a warmth that lingered on the tongue, like it was seasoned with memory itself. Her grandchildren would arrive in the afternoon, filling the small Chicago home with laughter and stories, but there was always a sacred hush when the pot was opened. The smell alone made grown men tear up, and every time someone asked for the recipe, Jeanette would just smile and shake her head. "It's not written," she'd say, "it's carried." Among the grandchildren, Mark was the closest to her, quiet, thoughtful, and always helping her set the table, dry dishes, or collect fresh herbs from the yard. He often sat at the kitchen door just watching her stir. At 27, Mark was the only one who still came every Sunday, even after the others got too busy, too distant. Sometimes he'd catch his grandmother staring off into the distance as she stirred, a faraway look in her eyes that he couldn't quite understand. On those days, her hands moved from muscle memory alone, adding pinches of ingredients without measuring, her thoughts clearly somewhere else, someone else. Mark never interrupted these moments. He sensed they were sacred, though he couldn't say why. If you are enjoying the story, type 5 in the comments and subscribe for more videos like this. If not, type 0. It helps me create even better content. For you, continuing, Mark's life outside those Sundays was a struggle. A talented architect with dreams bigger than his opportunities, he'd been passed over for promotion twice. His tiny apartment was filled with sketches of buildings that existed only in his imagination. The recession had hit the industry hard, and at 27, he was beginning to wonder if he'd chosen the wrong path entirely. His girlfriend of 3 years had recently left him, tired of his dedication to a career that seemed to be going nowhere. "You care more about those buildings than you do about us," she'd said on her way out. Maybe she was right. The only constant joy in his life was Sundays with Grandma Jeanette. On a particularly cold Chicago winter morning, Mark arrived earlier than usual. The familiar smell of the ragu wasn't yet filling the house. Strange. Grandma Jeanette was always cooking by this hour. He called out, but no answer came. Climbing the creaking stairs to her bedroom, a sense of dread washed over him. He found her sitting in her rocking chair by the window, staring out at the snow-covered yard. "Grandma," he whispered. She turned slowly, and he saw tears on her cheeks. "Mark," she said, her voice frail, "I can't remember." Her hands trembled as she held up a small container of spice. "I can't remember if it's 1 pinch or 2. After all these years, it's slipping away." The doctor had warned them last month about the early signs, but seeing her confusion made it real. Alzheimer's, the word they all feared but never said aloud. Would she forget the recipe before she could pass it on? Would she forget him too? "It's all right, Grandma," Mark said, taking her hand. "I'll help you. We'll cook together." But as they descended to the kitchen, he could see the fear in her eyes. The recipe wasn't written down anywhere. It existed only in her mind, in her hands. It was tradition, heritage, memory, all simmering in one pot. And it was fading. That Sunday, the dish didn't taste quite right. No one said anything, but Mark saw his father exchange glances with his aunts. They knew. And as the weeks progressed, Grandma Jeanette's condition deteriorated faster than any of them expected. Some Sundays, she'd forget ingredients entirely. Others, she'd add too much of something, making the dish too bitter or too sweet. Mark started taking notes secretly, trying to capture her process before it was gone forever. But it wasn't just about measurements. It was about the way her hands moved, the rhythm of her stirring, the timing she felt rather than tracked. How do you document muscle memory? How do you preserve the touch of someone who's cooked the same meal for over 60 years? Is there anyone who could ever replicate the taste of this special dish that has brought the family together every Sunday for decades? The worst Sunday came 3 months later. Mark arrived to find his grandmother in the kitchen, staring at the empty pot. I don't know what goes in it," she said simply, her eyes wide with fear. "I know it's important. I know everyone is coming, but I can't remember what it is." Mark's heart broke. He took over that day, following his notes, trying to recreate what he'd observed. But everyone knew it wasn't the same. After that, Grandma Jeanette moved in with Mark's parents. The Sunday tradition continued, but it was hollow now. Mark tried his best each week, but something essential was missing. The dish was nutritious, even tasty, but it lacked that indefinable quality that had made everyone fall silent at the first bite. 6 months later, on a snowy morning, much like the one when he'd found her crying, Grandma Jeanette passed peacefully in her sleep. Mark found himself standing alone in her kitchen the day after the funeral. His parents were selling the house. Too many memories, they said. Too painful. He ran his fingers along the worn countertop where she'd chopped countless onions and herbs. He opened cupboards filled with spices, some so old the labels had faded. And then, reaching for her favorite wooden spoon, he noticed something unusual. The handle seemed thicker at the bottom. Examining it closer, he realized it unscrewed. His heart pounding, he twisted the bottom off. Inside was a tightly rolled piece of yellowed paper. With trembling fingers, he unrolled it. A recipe, written in faded ink, but not for polenta con ragu. Instead, at the top, in careful cursive, were the words, "Karina's Truth. Read when you're ready to know." The letter was dated 1963. Mark sat down at the kitchen table, the same one where he'd eaten hundreds of Sunday meals, and began to read. "My dearest one," it began, "if you are reading this, you have found my secret. The dish you know as our family tradition isn't mine. It belongs to a woman named Karina, your grandfather's first love." Mark's hands shook. Grandfather Peter died when Mark was just 10, a kind but quiet man who rarely spoke of his past. The letter continued. "Before he met me, before the war, Pete was engaged to Karina in Italy. Her family had passed down this recipe for generations. When the bombing began, they planned to flee together. But on the day they were to leave, Karina went back for her mother. Neither survived." Mark had to pause, his eyes filling with tears. All these years, and he'd never known. "When Pete came to America," the letter went on, "he brought only 3 things: the clothes on his back, his mother's rosary, and this recipe, the last piece of the woman he'd loved. He couldn't bear to cook it himself. The first time I made it for him, trying to follow these instructions, he wept through the entire meal. Not because it tasted the same, it didn't, but because it brought her back for a moment." Mark wiped his eyes and continued reading. "I could have hidden this away, pretended the recipe was my creation. But love isn't like that. Love has room for ghosts. So every Sunday I've cooked this dish, not just for our family, but for her memory too. I've carried her with us all these years." The letter ended with the actual recipe, detailed and precise. But there was a postscript. "The secret isn't in the ingredients, it's in knowing why you're cooking. I cooked with gratitude, for the life I had with Pete, for the children we raised, for the love that came after loss. Find your reason, and the dish will taste right." As Mark folded the letter, something else fell from the wooden spoon. A small, faded photograph of a young woman with dark eyes and a serious expression, standing in front of an Italian storefront. On the back, in the same handwriting, "Karina Naples, 1939. He'd never seen her before, yet somehow she felt familiar. Have you ever discovered a family secret that changed how you understood your loved ones? Share your experience in the comments. Winter turned to spring, and Mark kept trying to perfect the recipe. Each Sunday, he invited what remained of the family to his small apartment. The dish was good, sometimes very good, but never quite what they remembered. His cousin Sophia, always the most outspoken, finally addressed it. "It's delicious, Mark, but it's not Grandma's." "I know," he admitted. "I'm missing something." That night, after everyone had gone, Mark sat alone with the recipe and the photograph. What was he missing? He had the exact measurements now, the precise timing. But Grandma Jeanette's note kept coming back to him. The secret isn't in the ingredients, it's in knowing why you're cooking. Why was he cooking? To preserve tradition? To keep the family together? These were worthy reasons, but they didn't feel complete. The answer came to him unexpectedly. A colleague had submitted Mark's design to a prestigious architectural competition without telling him. To everyone's shock, he was named a finalist. The project that had been rejected by his firm, too innovative, too risky, they'd said, was now being celebrated. At the ceremony, the judge mentioned something that struck him deeply. Architecture isn't just about buildings. It's about creating spaces where life happens, where memories form. That night, looking at his drawings, Mark finally understood. Architecture, like cooking, wasn't just about the technical elements. It was about creating something that held people, that sheltered their lives and memories. His grandmother hadn't just been cooking a dish. She'd been creating a space where their family could be together, where stories could be shared, where love could be expressed without words. The next Sunday, Mark approached the cooking differently. He placed Karina's photograph on the counter, along with pictures of Grandma Jeanette, Grandfather Pete, and the whole family through the years. As he cooked, he thought about all of them. The woman he'd never met who'd created the recipe, the grandfather who'd carried it across an ocean, the grandmother who'd honored both of them with every meal. He thought about his own journey, his struggles and dreams. He cooked with gratitude, with memory, with hope. When the family arrived and took their first bites, a hushed silence fell over the table, the kind he remembered from childhood. His father looked up, eyes wide. "How did you—" he began, but couldn't finish. The taste had rendered him speechless. Later, as Mark was washing dishes, his father came to help dry, something he hadn't done in years. "You know," he said quietly, "Mum would be proud, not just of the food, of you." Over the following months, Mark's professional life transformed. His finalist position led to job offers, but instead of accepting them, he took a risk. He opened his own small firm, naming it Karina, a tribute to a woman whose recipe had, in a roundabout way, given him courage. His designs began to attract attention for their unique approach to spaces, buildings that felt somehow both innovative and familiar, modern yet timeless. "I design places where memories can happen," he explained in an interview. But the true success was more personal. The Sunday tradition continued and expanded. Mark's cousins began bringing their children. His sister, who'd moved across the country, started flying in once a month. The family, which had begun to drift apart after Grandma Jeanette's passing, was reconnecting. On the one-year anniversary of his grandmother's death, Mark made a decision. After the meal, he gathered everyone in the living room. "I have something to share with you," he said, and told them the story of Karina and Grandfather Pete. He passed around the photograph and the letter. There were tears, questions, and finally laughter as they realized how perfectly Grandma Jeanette had kept this secret all those years. "But there's one more thing," Mark said. He handed each family member a small hand-bound book. Inside was the recipe, written out carefully along with the story behind it. "Grandma said it wasn't written, it was carried," Mark explained, "and she was right, but I think she'd want us all to carry it now." That night, As the last family members were leaving, Mark's father lingered. "You know," he said, "I always wondered why she insisted on that dish every Sunday, even when it would have been easier to make something else. I asked her once when I was about your age. She just said, 'Some traditions are bigger than we understand.' I think I get it now." He hugged his son tightly. "You're a good man, Mark. You've given us back something we thought was lost." Mark watched his father walk to the car, then turned back to his apartment. On the counter sat the wooden spoon with its secret compartment, next to the photographs of 3 generations, and beside them the pot simmered gently, carrying forward not just a recipe, but a legacy of love that had survived war, ocean crossings, and even the fading of memory. Years later, when Mark's own children were old enough to help in the kitchen, he would tell them the story as they cooked together each Sunday. "This dish doesn't just feed our bodies," he'd explain. "It feeds our connection to each other, to those who came before us, even to people we never met." His daughter Emily took to the tradition with particular enthusiasm. By age 12, she could make the ragu almost entirely on her own. One Sunday, as they worked side by side, she asked the question he'd been waiting for, "Dad, why do we really do this every week? Is it just because Great-Grandma Jeanette did?" Mark smiled and reached for the wooden spoon with its hollow handle. "Let me tell you about 3 people," he began. "A woman named Karina, who created something beautiful. A man named Pete, who loved her enough to carry her memory across an ocean, and a woman named Jeanette, who was generous enough to honor both of them." Emily listened intently as he told the full story. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she asked, "So, when we cook this, we're remembering all of them?" "Yes," Mark said, "and creating memories for ourselves too. That's the magic of traditions. They connect us across time." Mark's architectural firm had grown successful over the years, known for creating spaces that felt meaningful from the moment you entered them. In interviews, he often credited his grandmother for his understanding of how physical spaces could hold emotional significance. "She taught me that the most important elements in design aren't visible on the blueprints," he would say. But he never told the full story publicly. That remained a family matter, shared only on Sundays over steaming plates of polenta con ragu. The dish that had once been Karina's, then Grandma Jeanette's, and now belonged to all of them. A recipe, not just written, but carried forward in hearts and hands and memories. Congratulations. Type 9 in the comments so that I know you stayed until the end with me. Thank you for watching, and until tomorrow's story on this same channel.